Hello, everyone. My name is Evon Benson Idahosa, and it's my absolute pleasure to be able to be here with you today to share a little bit about how hope and healing have been instrumental in my life and in our work over the last 10 months. When people ask me what I do, I often say that I stretch tight shoes. And usually the next question is, what? How? What does that mean? But as a young child growing up in Nigeria, my mother would often summon my sisters and I just before she left for a trip to England or to the US. And she would literally trace our feet on pieces of paper. Upon her arrival abroad, she would then take these drawings to a shoe store in an effort to estimate our shoe sizes to purchase shoes for us. And sometimes the shoes that she would return back to Nigeria with worked, and other times painfully, excruciatingly, they actually didn't work because they didn't fit us. And this would mean me often wearing the smaller shoes of my sisters for some time in order to stretch them out, right, to make them more comfortable for them to walk. But as I grew older, I realized that posture became consistent in my life. And it was ultimately what God had called me to do, i.e. to stretch tight shoes, create more space for women and girls at the table. And so I consider myself rather fortunate to be able to do the work that we do at the NGO that I founded 6 years ago, Pathfinders. We work with women survivors of sex trafficking and sexual violence in Nigeria. It is the work of justice, of making that which is unseen seen, of standing in spiritual defiance of what is, of reconciling, right, our everyday reality to God's intention. It truly is sacred work. Because the truth of the matter is that the bodies of African women, including those that we partner with, are some of the most weaponized and legislated upon in the entire world. Any of us who do this work know that we stand as intercessors. But generally speaking, our work is threefold. First, we partner with survivors of sex trafficking and sexual violence, many of whom have recently repatriated to Nigeria after having their bodies literally consumed and recycled on thousands of occasions by the European sex industry. We partner with them to provide holistic rehabilitation on their terms, right? We refer to these as path plans, as personalized action to healing plans that are powered by the voices of survivors while returning their agency and self-determination. We also work to dismantle inequitable social structures by demanding accountability from those who have the power to end trafficking and sexual violence against women in Nigeria, by influencing the influencers, right? Through trainings, through workshops, through partnerships. We are striving towards a form of redemptive rescripting that shifts that power to those from whom it has been stripped. Finally, we're not only speaking truth to power, but also speaking truth to the seemingly powerless, right, through the awareness raising arm of our work. Here we engage a community to see trafficking, to see sexual violence as a crime, not solely against the individual, but also against the community itself. That shift in power dynamics is what we empower the community to reclaim. But right when we were all getting our stride as thought leaders, as a leading voice in the fight against trafficking in Nigeria, the entire world stopped, literally stopped. Perhaps I wouldn't have, but I was forced to after contracting COVID-19 in March of 2020. We all had to pivot. I had to pivot. There were days that I wasn't sure I would awaken the next morning, days that my final prayer every night was that God would not allow my 14-year-old daughter to find me lifeless. But it was in those moments that I was facing what some would call an existential crisis that I miraculously summoned up the courage to choose hope over paralyzing fear. You see, hope became this renewable resource for me that connected my faith to the substance of things hoped for, right? To the evidence of things not seen. But as hard as those moments were, there were lessons that I learned both in my personal life as a leader and also in the work that we do in Nigeria. The first was that choosing hope is an act of resistance, right? It's an act of resistance in much the same way that me showing up as myself, me taking up my own space at the table as a Black African woman is often an act of resistance in a world that has intentionally denied access for us. Hope seeks out the beauty in a kingdom that is here, but not yet. It propels us into sitting with that pain and suffering and ultimately finding a way to curate all of it, all the ashes into beauty. And no one exemplified this sentiment more than our survivors, who also chose hope. Hope over circumstances that triggered their past trauma, hope over what threatened to obliterate the walls of the lives that they had painstakingly began to rebuild. With most of them working in the informal sector that required that they work daily to eat, to survive, to feed their children, they chose hope when they trusted us as we encouraged them to pivot, to re-strategize, to bring their businesses online, or to engage in mobile services, all while facing debilitating lockdowns and curfews. Hope certainly is an act of resistance. Secondly, hope is a healer, right? It's a healer that, as Walter Wink would say, envisions an alternate reality, an alternate future to the one fated by the momentum of current forces. It calls forth, in my experience, that which is unseen, and it hinges the moment to a future that is anchored on God's redemptive plan. It is what stands at the intersection of our brokenness and that plan. And in embracing it, in applying it as the balm of Gilead, we start to heal. I started to heal, and so did our survivors. Hope is also a person, right? In much the same way that grace and truth are embodied in Christ, who in the scriptures assures us that as he is, so are we in this world. I began to seek that grace, that truth, that hope in those that God had sent to support me during that season. It showed up in the eyes of my daughter every day. It showed up through the groceries and the food that some of my friends forced over my pride. It showed up in the FaceTime calls with my team and our survivors who prayed for my healing as I did for theirs. Finally, hope seeks out and ignites a community of light. Hope seeks out hope and ignites a community, right? And what I mean by that is that it surfaces to connect the like-minded. Over the summer, as we watched America reckon with the fruit of racial injustice, hope was what connected millions of people around the world who demanded the change they wanted to see. Hope is also what unified me and many activists, some of whom are in this conference, to demand that the Nigerian government bring back our girls. The 276 girls from Chibok, Nigeria, who had been violently stolen from their lives by Boko Haram, a terrorist group in Nigeria. Almost 7 years later, 112 of them remain missing. And Bring Back Our Girls for me has transformed into a prayer, a daily prayer that I utter unto God. Hope endures. And so as we end this unprecedented year, I, like many other survivors, continue on our journey to wholeness in our healing. But we persevere for the sake of those against whom marginalization has been used as a tool of oppression. Yes, there is a balm in Gilead, but we have been called to apply it. We have been tasked with rescripting the narrative, with praying into being God's justice. With hope, we collectively stand at the intersection of our world's brokenness and God's redemptive plan. And at the end of the day, hope wins. Hope wins. Thank you so much for listening.